What's up, Covenant Love? Welcome to our brand new Monday night show called This Generation. The reason why we're calling it This Generation is because we're talking about Gen Z and specifically some really big topics that we think are very important to really tackle as we talk about this generation and really reaching this generation for the Lord. And we want to see Gen Z come to Jesus. We don't want to see, the statistics about this generation are that they're leaving the church in droves, that just thousands upon thousands of them are just leaving what they've traditionally grown up in and everything. And so for us, I think, been in youth ministry. For all of us, we've just spent a lot of time with this generation, and we've seen a lot of what's gone right in our opinion, and then we've seen what's gone wrong. And what's gone wrong around a lot of different topics, a lot of different things that the church has tried to address. And so over the next couple of weeks, we just want to talk about some of those things and hopefully bring some healthy conversation. There's no way that in 30 minutes or so that we could totally tap into all of the different aspects and nuances of these different conversations that we want to have. But we want to hopefully start some healthy conversation, maybe cause some people to start asking some questions about the way that they're raising their Gen Zer, or maybe even how you can be a part of, if you're not raising a child, or if you just have a passion for this next generation. What are some things that you can be thinking about, some conversations that you can be having, some topics that you can be looking into so that we can reach this generation more effectively? And tonight we are starting off with what can be an uncomfortable conversation for some people, which is purity culture.
We're talking about sex.
We're talking about sex. We're talking about purity. And hopefully one of the things that we'll talk about is we'll get even deeper into the topic of purity and beyond just what the church has made it out to be, which is like abstinence from sex or whatever. So we're going to dive right in, and I'm going to go ahead and cut to the chase with the thought that the church has gotten purity culture wrong, and that in a lot of ways, especially in the 90s, early 2000s, there was this big push. There were books that were being written. There were sermons that are being taught. And it was basically all around this topic of purity. And one of the things that I know that we have all talked about a lot is that movement was rooted in fear. So
fear and shame.
And shame. So I'm going to start off with this question of what is the problem with having a purity movement that's rooted in fear? What do you think?
Rooted in fear. I think the biggest issue is that whenever you have purity culture that's rooted in fear, is that you completely take out the God design and the joy that's built into sex. Is that
Unpack
like
that.
Is that like biblically sex is meant to be one of the most celebrated things in Scripture? You know what I mean? Yeah. And we built a culture around it that's solely based out of shame and fear. And so now it's like sex is almost a cuss word in the church, for so many people. It's like the thing that no one really talks about, it's, and it's not only the thing that's not talked about from the pulpit, but, like very few parents actually have the talk with their kids, you know what I mean? Yeah. I think we were talking before this, and you said that your parents didn't have the talk with you, right?
I had really good parents, really good godly parents who love Jesus, and I had never had the talk.
Yeah,
I was taught by hip hop and MTV and BET. I was taught by movies, and the laws first mentioned, which like when it comes to like sex, like I remember the first time I was exposed to pornography and things like that. That was like in 5th grade. Yeah. And so literally I only heard the negative connotations. I only heard the this is, if you do this, you're going to hell. You're going to hell. You've ruined yourself. There was a lot of just a lot of fear, a lot of and I could feel that, but also I remember just when I started really just again getting into stuff, I didn't know I was not aware of actually like all the things that would come from it. I wasn't aware of any of that, and so
The things that would come from sex,
from
like sex outside of marriage. You mean?
Yeah. Like I remember all the messages of like sex and when I had sex, I was like, these jokers are crazy. This is the best day of my life. What y'all talking about?
Yeah.
And whatnot. But I do remember just the church and the message of, if you do this, you're pretty much like dirty for like life.
I mean, it really is like you have that scarlet letter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And what's taught so many times is that, you know, like if you have sex outside of marriage, then you're giving away something that can never be replaced.
That can never be replaced or redeemed.
Is that, you know, people say God can heal you, but you'll never get your virginity back. You know what I mean? Which, whether that's true or not, you know, whatever. But the fact, though, is that the language was always based out of fear. You know,
shame.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think so many times that like why parents don't talk to their students or to their kids about sex is because there's this mindset. Well, if I tell my kids about it, like maybe they'll go out and
they're gonna do it.
Wow. Yeah.
You know. And so once again, like I'm not even gonna have the conversation with them. Out of fear of them going out and doing it, you know, or maybe it's out of my own shame and out of my own hurt and out of my own pain that I'm not going to have that conversation with them about it because, you know, I'm still figuring out, you know what I mean? I'm still, you know, like whatever, man. So I think a lot of it is based out of fear.
And this is where I think, especially when it comes to the church, where we feel like sex originated in sin.
Yes.
And there's this thing that I'm like, well, if the world is doing it, then the church can't have any part of it.
Yeah.
And there's this feeling that which is when you read the Bible, it's like, yo, man, this thing's everywhere. And so and so
talks about sex,
and so and so knew so and so, like things like that, you know. And we pretty much like, and this is a kind of like a thing that the church does, is that we just give over things to the world and let the world define it.
Yeah,
and so literally we end up doing this, and so we don't talk about whether the beauty of sex, we don't talk about the necessity, we don't talk about the God's original design intent. I'm gonna let you unpack when it comes to a line that you said earlier, which is man. But it's like, we give this over, and so the church only knows dysfunctional, like sin-filled sex, and that's the definition of sex.
And then, like when we do think about sex inside of marriage, it's usually dull, boring.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like there's no passion, there's no fire there, there's no ecstasy, there's no fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why? Because I think we're scared if we teach that side of things,
they're gonna do it.
It's like, oh well, we're telling them how awesome it is. Well, then, like, oh man, you know, I don't want to, you know, I think a big line is, I don't want to awaken love
before it's time.
You know, which like there is truth to that statement, but though, like it's taught out of fear. You know, and when things like that are taught out of fear, you strip the sacredness and you strip the joy and like and like really what you're doing is you're stripping a side of who God is. You know, because like if God made this thing, like it's a reflection of his character and who he is.
Marcellus, what's your opinion on the difference between fear of sin and the fear of the Lord whenever it comes to purity?
So say it one more time. You said unpack
that, brother.
You said the fear of,
like the difference, but so like we've talked about how purity culture has really been rooted in a fear of sex. You know,
which is a fear of sin.
Which is a fear of sin.
Because we equated sex to sin. Yeah.
And so there's a difference between when you have a fear of sin and whenever you have a fear of the Lord. Like when you want to honor the Lord, when you want to worship the Lord, like by not doing something versus I'm afraid that he's going to get after me, you know?
I think it goes back to what we were talking about before we actually started shooting this, is like, what's purity? You know, is purity not having sex, or is purity being set apart for Jesus?
Yeah.
You know? And so the fear of the Lord really in itself is really saying, yo, like my being belongs to him.
Yeah.
And I belong to him. Everything that is me, it's all to him, you know? And it's so like, especially when it comes to like sex, right? Like I'm the only one that's not married out of all these guys, right? So
soon to be though. Hey,
exactly.
my man.
Yes. Hello, yes, may want to shout, okay? But listen, oh Jesus, I love the fact like my parents, right? I'm kind of going off stream, but it's okay.
Go for it.
But my parents, like they opened up with me like from the jump, right? When I was young, they told me how, about sex and taught me about sex and stuff, and they taught me the beauty of it, right?
Wow, come on.
So it really wasn't like, when it came to like understanding what sex was, from an early age, I knew that it wasn't right to do it before marriage, because sex is made for marriage, for that union between you and your wife,
Yeah.
And so it's not the fact of being afraid of not having sex. It's about understanding the gift in it, or the
Yes.
prize that's in it, or
Yeah.
the reward that comes in it,
Yeah.
And so it's about just like shifting our language, even when telling our kids or trying to teach our kids, like what it is and what it's really for and why God designed it,
Well, and I think that's the interesting thing is, I think most people nowadays, I mean, I feel like it's fair to say most people don't have a healthy theology of sex.
Yeah.
They don't have a healthy, godly understanding of sex. And so even to realize, something that we've been talking about is, whenever you look at sexuality within the Bible, that we have a command to be sexual from God before we have a command to be obedient. So even to realize
Say that
we
again.
were so we received, whenever you look at Genesis 1 or Genesis, so in Genesis, whenever God creates man, the first thing that he says is subdue the earth and fill it, multiply, right? His first command to man is subdue the earth and have sex.
Yeah.
Man and woman. So, I mean, that would be a whole nother conversation to really unpack, like how it's not just a command to men to be sexual, it's a command to man and woman to be sexual. So he says, subdue the earth, have sex, and then after that is whenever he gets into, and I've given you every tree in the garden, just don't eat of this tree, right?
Yeah.
And so one of my favorite lines that I've been reading from some theologians is, we were sexual before we were sinful. And so most people only equate sex with sin.
Yeah,
they only equate sex with the wrongdoing, the bad part of it.
Yeah.
And so I think we have a generation that's looking to the rest of the world because it's like, well, when I look on TikTok, when I look on Instagram, whenever I look on Twitter and people are talking about sex, it seems like a ball. It seems like an awesome, amazing time. And I want, why wouldn't God want that for me? Why wouldn't, instead of like what you're saying, like, we haven't taught the beauty of sex. And so kids don't even really understand like what they're supposed to be guarding, what they're supposed to be treasuring, what they're supposed to be loving. Like when you teach abstinence, not from a place of, you're going to go to hell.
You're going to go to hell. You're going to have babies. You're going to have STDs. You're going to
right?
all of that.
Instead of teaching it from, sex is really beautiful. Sex is actually a treasure. And so it's not, you're going to die. It's, I want to protect this thing. I want to protect this beautiful, amazing gift that God has given me. I want to guard the treasure.
Yeah. Man, I even think too, so one of the best analogies that I've heard it put, is that if you compare sex to fire, that like, because I mean, a lot of times Scripture does, right? Paul says, hey, if you're burning, get married.
Might as well get married,
Like, like there's nothing wrong with burning, bless God.
He said, God made you to burn.
Yes. But like a fire inside of a fireplace is beautiful. It's joyful. It provides protection. It provides warmth. You know what I mean? But as soon as that fire leaves the fireplace, that's when it becomes dangerous and painful.
That's
so something in one context is healthy and it's good.
Yeah.
But when it leaves to a different context or it leaves the parameters that it was made to be in, you know what I mean? Like it can burn down the house, and it can become painful. So like sex is a joy. Sex is amazing. Sex is
beautiful.
Beautiful. It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good. But when when you wander outside of the boundaries with your sex, and I'm not even going to say this, your sexuality as well.
No.
I mean, it becomes painful, because I think too what purity culture has really messed a lot of people up with is not only regarding sex, but also your sexuality and also to your sex drive. You know, I think it has made young men feel like they're pieces of dirt and trash because they have a sex
you're
drive.
sinful.
Yeah.
If you feel it, if you're tempted, if you're this, if you're that, if this is something that you're really feeling, then something's wrong.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the message of purity culture. So that's why we need to have all the literally the boundaries and the walls to make us feel pure. And so when it comes to what the world's saying, because they say, well, if you're repressing something, then you're in bondage. And so this is freedom if you can just do what you want. That's what the world's message is.
And the church has taught people repression.
Yes.
Instead of teaching function or context, you know. And so that's one of the big issues is like another example that I would use. It's like, you know, you don't put diesel inside of a gasoline vehicle. You don't put gasoline inside of a diesel vehicle. You know, it's kind of that same thing of like, you want to have things in the right place. It's like, it's not, don't get gas because you might accidentally put diesel in your gas vehicle. It's no, learn how to do it the right way. Learn how to put things learn how to put things in the place that God intended them to be.
Learn the intent. And so when it comes to the intent of purity, like again, from the early 90s, we're all, well, I don't know if you're a millennial, but
no, I'm a Gen Z.
You're the only Gen Z here. We the millennials out here.
We got him right here. We're going to get him saved. No, I'm sorry. He is saved, and he's the pastor of your junior hires.
It's real. But like the early 90s to 2000s, this was teaching that we've had ceremonies, we've had teaching.
The rings, bro.
We had the
rings.
purity rings. We signed the contract of I'm not going to have sex. And then I was like, the moment I did, I was like, that thing, I could just tear that and suck her up, because Lord of mercy. But we've made purities make it sound like this was supposed to only be for your spouse. And this was, you're pure for your wife. You're pure for your husband.
Well, it's like your sex drive.
Your sex drive.
Your sex drive. So not sex, but your sex drive.
Yeah. And so in reality, though, what's the intent of purity? It doesn't start with your spouse. It starts with the Lord.
Yes.
And so the beauty of
I was waiting for you to say the rest of that. Can I just imagine people at home saying, "What is he saying?"
Wait a minute. So because we dangled the literally purity culture would say this. It's like, if you save yourself, if you don't have sex, your first night with your love, this is to be the greatest gift you could ever give them.
The hand of God is going to be there.
The hand of God's going to
You're going to have the greatest sex.
You'll have the greatest sex.
The world's
in
not
your
going
life.
to know what's.
When in reality, the first night's usually the worst.
The worst, bro.
Usually it's the worst sex. Anyways, but here's the reality, though. It doesn't start with your spouse. I'm not pure just for my spouse. I'm not. It starts with the Lord. It really does. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God.
Yeah.
Worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. Wait a minute. What's all this stuff mean?
Yeah.
It means this, that I actually have access to knowing him more and knowing him deeper and knowing him in a more intimate way when I'm actually saying no to things. Saying no to things is not repression. It's not this bondage. Like, again, the world would try to say, if you feel you should do it. It's saying I know. It's honoring actually myself and honoring the Lord. And so I'm saying, no, I'm not gonna throw up my sexuality or throw up my body to something that's just temporal. I want something that's even greater than what I'm feeling.
Well, that's the amazing thing is like, so out of purity culture and teaching, like, if you save yourself for your wedding night, then your wedding night is going to be amazing and incredible, right? And we make it out to be this, and we set people up for failure, really, because then, again, we're making sex more about a no instead of a yes. We're making sex, and so then within marriage, whenever these kids that are growing up, I know so many people that have been damaged by so I won't call out all the books that were written because
I was about to call it. So we ain't calling out stuff.
I was going to call them out. But because like one of the things that I want to say is like whenever you look at the people that wrote books like I Kissed Dating Goodbye and, or Every Young Man's Battle, all these different guys have actually entered into apostasy. These guys, a lot of them are atheists now. A lot of them are divorced. A lot of them have had an affair, everything. Why? Because it is a fear-based abstinence instead of a yes or worshipful form of abstinence.
Like
it's
a joy-based abstinence.
Right, exactly. And so then you've got all these people that have said no to their desires and to honestly something that God placed on the inside of them. They're saying no for all these years instead of saying yes to the Lord. And then they get into marriage. Sex is not everything that it cracks up to be because, because they don't know how to communicate about it. Sex has been this taboo thing. They don't know how to talk about it.
Yeah, well, like it's like an art form, It's like a it's like one of the best analogies that I've heard is that like sex is like playing an instrument. You know what I mean? It's like you don't pick it up and know how to play it.
And you know how to play everything.
Like, it takes years to master that thing.
Exactly.
And so, dude, I've read so many stories where people save themselves for marriage, expecting, that first night to just be ecstasy heaven,
Yeah.
And especially for women, and it's like they get there and they have sex, and all they experience is really pain on that first night.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's like they feel cheated by God.
Yeah. They feel yes.
Yeah. And so now purity culture has damaged the character of God because I think someone's sexuality is probably one of the most fragile parts of their being. And so because they saved themselves and now like they've been lied to by the church about this amazing, because the church cracks sex up to be like the top tier, you know what I mean? Like here's heaven and here's sex, just right underneath it.
Yeah.
Which sex is that
sex
good,
is great,
but it takes,
I mean, it's great, but it's like y'all saying that this is like pretty much the top tier with heaven. I'm like, wait a minute.
It takes work.
It takes work, you know? And so like whenever I enter into that thing and it's not everything I expected it to be, and now I'm like, man, like the church lied to me. Yeah. God's a liar too.
Yeah.
So even and like I said, when it comes to, and again, purity culture, when it comes to women, like I know personally when it comes to just talks with my wife of just the messaging that she's had in her past that made her look at her own body as something that was wrong. Wow. And so purity culture, when it comes to and even when it comes to like I said, the church where modesty is holiness and again, we're not saying modesty's not bad.
Quick disclaimer: we're not saying to have sex before marriage, and we're not saying to dress immodestly. Let me just interject
Modesty's
that
good.
really quick.
We need modesty. Don't get that twisted. But it's but we've purity culture in which there's the head figures. When you started look at the history of this movement, it was men who were really
jacked up,
really in the belief of we don't have self-control. So we need to have control over what women do so we don't function in lust.
So you're saying that purity culture, another one of the foundations of purity culture was men are animals that can't control themselves.
So
instead of men are filled with the Holy Spirit, they've been empowered by grace.
Made in the image of God.
To say not just no to their bodies, but yes to God in worship.
Yes. And so literally what we've done when it comes to purity culture is we've looked at a whole gender. We looked at women and said, you've got to do your part so that we don't sin. And again, this messaging was rooted in shame. And so we're literally putting shame on our brothers, on our sisters in the Lord. And literally we end up creating the shame-filled machine and what only produces more shame.
Yeah. And what's a crazy fact, and here's how much purity culture did not work, is that millennials had more sex than Gen Zers are having now.
Millennials? Oh my goodness.
Listen, and with this, with Gen Zers being over, there's nothing that is attacking Gen Zers more than just a perverted sexuality and just experimentation. Like not just go out and have sex, but just to experiment with their sexuality. But what's crazy is that millennials, right, who us, we grew up in this purity culture, is that we had more sex than Gen Zers,
which is wild because even when it comes to the rise of pornography. And the crazy the statistics of porn are like wild, crazy. And this generation actually, and you told me the statistics of this is like they're not actually having as much sex as
Gen Z is the most sexualized, least sexed generation that has ever existed. So your generation is bombarded by things like pornography, bombarded by things like soft pornography on social media and things like that.
Articles,
but they're not.
Sex.
Exactly. But they're not having as much sex, which is crazy to me. But your generation has really been exposed to sex like no other generation has been exposed to it, which I think is so interesting. And I think what's crazy about that is that your generation, Gen Z, most generations, they're not learning about sex from their parents. They're not learning about sex from the church. No. They're learning about sex from culture, social media, culture, Instagram. TikTok, all those things.
Social media, TikTok, like Snapchat, like music, like their favorite artists. They're learning about sex from these.
Right. Well, I mean, you deal with them on a weekly basis. Like, what are you seeing with them?
How do I say this? So there are students. Okay, so I'm over the middle schoolers, right? So what I would let me say it. I'm trying to
say it like I be like say how it say what you just made. I know what you're about to say.
No, but it's just, man. Repeat the question one more time.
So like, what are you seeing? Like, what are you seeing with the kids that you're pastoring on a weekly basis as far as like what they think about sex, what they're knowing about sex? Like, are you seeing these kids that are just oblivious to it, or are you seeing these kids that are actually like they're aware?
So just to tap on that. So there's a kid that I was we have these outings that we do and stuff like that. So there was a kid I was hanging with, and I asked him, I was like, "Hey, what kind of music you like?" And he named this artist, right? And that was an artist that I used to listen to when I was in high school. Right? And I was like, bruh.
Now you know.
Look, I didn't say anything, but I was like, bruh. Now you know the stuff that man says and some of the things that he talks about and everything. I was like, whoa. Okay, so like, just with that being said, like these kids, they're taking it in.
Yeah.
They are literally like, there are kids I talk. They say like, man, I've watched pornography.
Yeah.
Like, man, I've done this.
Yeah.
I've done that. And it's just the fact of like, man, you're in 6th grade.
Yeah.
And so these kids, they're like 11 to 12, like they were born in like 2010, right?
Yeah.
Like, so it's like, it's like, but
Makes
I
you feel
think,
old, right?
Holy smokes.
Makes you feel old.
but I think another thing is like the access to like, the access. It's so easy to pull up a phone.
No.
Yeah.
Like it's so easy to go on Google. It's so easy to do these things
Be on social media, TikTok.
and access these things.
Yeah.
And it's just so let me ask you this question.
Tumblr.
Okay. So there's a parent watching right now, right? Who says my son or my daughter dealt with this, or I know they're dealing with certain things in their life, right? How do I address it, or how do I bring this to them in a way of not with condemnation, but with love, but in a way that they will understand what your sex life is like, what your sex drive is like, what is purity, And it's like, okay, and even if my kid is not dealing with this, or not, or they're not there yet, maybe they're like 5 and 6, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do I present this to my child?
I think number one, like we've got to deal with ourselves.
Yes.
I mean, that I think that's one thing that most parents probably, I've seen a lot of parents really afraid of actually dealing into their own, like diving into their own ideas about sex and diving into their own ways of how they've viewed sex incorrectly, or even looking at their own sex life and going like like, am I actually happy? Like, do I actually have something to present to my child that's like worth having, worth waiting for, you know, and to really take an opportunity to go, like, if I can't answer, like, if my answer to the question, is my sex life worth waiting for, then I think I've got to be willing to say, all right, I need to go to counseling. Like, all right, I need to call the church. I need to call Pastor Eddie. I need to get in and see what's going on. If you can answer yes to that, but like say like, oh man, my sex life is great. Me and my wife, we have a good time. Like, to be able to then go, okay, what would make me apprehensive about it? Am I apprehensive to talk about it because I'm afraid that then my child's gonna just go out and start having sex with everybody? Am I apprehensive about it because what if they ask me a question that I don't know the answer to? What if and I think that the number one thing that I have encouraged parents to have is bravery and patience. I think that those are the two things of like, we can't, like, if we want our kids to have a healthy view of sex, number one, we can't beat the smack out of them. Like, we can't just sit there and hit them over the head, like with our beliefs and all these different things. Like, we got to be willing to let them ask the hard, uncomfortable questions. And instead of like squirming in our chair whenever they just said oral sex and I didn't even know that they knew what that was. To be able to like just sit there and kind of like go,
don't freak out.
Okay, like I'm not going to freak out. But that's that bravery part, right? Don't freak out. Like, and don't be afraid when you don't know the answer. I think one of the things that spoke to me in my life with my parents, you know, and my parents aren't perfect by any stretch, but there would be times that I would ask a question and it would be like, I don't know. Let's look into that. You know, let's explore that together. And I think that that's, some parents need to be willing, because something that we were talking about, and I would love for you to talk about this, Josh, is like, it's easier. I think some parents think it's easier to make their kid afraid instead of making their kid understand.
Yeah, man. I think it's so good. And kind of my quick notes before I hop into that is that number one, like, it is like, I think we're looking for a quick fix, you know? It's like a parent is I'm looking for the right words to say to get my kid to stop having sex right away or whatever. And the truth is, so like you said, like it all starts, you know, as a parent, it all starts with me. You know what I mean? And that like, if my like my sex life is actually it is how my kids are going to view God, you know, in like a certain facet, in like a certain way. And so yeah, man. But what was your question again?
Everybody, y'all need to bring a pen and pencil. No, I'm joking. To say, so like, what's the like?
I got you.
Yeah, the fear.
Yeah, so fear-based understanding. You know, like so. In Jewish culture, whenever a couple would get married, what would happen is that there would be like this tent set up in the middle of the ceremony, and that right after that they said their vows is that the husband and wife now is that they would actually go in and have sex inside of this tent, and after they would have sex inside of this tent, they would take the bloody sheets and they would throw them over like the side of the tent for everyone. Like no one has left the marriage. No, everyone is surrounding this tent, waiting to see the bloody sheets, and that whenever the bloody sheets are thrown over, is that now, man, this eruption of celebration happens over it. And so imagine being like a 7-year-old kid, seeing bloody sheets thrown over, everyone starts cheering, and you know, it's like, why are we cheering over bloody sheets?
The curiosity sets in. Right?
You know what I mean? And here's the thing, is that like joy, I mean, sex was a place of joy, not a place of fear. It was like, son, daughter, like, let me tell you about the joyous thing of sex. Like y'all, like, listen, there is not a book in the Bible that is devoted to prayer. There is not a book in the Bible that is devoted to worship, but God saw it fit to devote a whole entire book in the Bible just for sex. It is a Song of Songs, a Song of Solomon, right? And like even in that, right, Song of Songs means that this is the greatest song that is written. So God says that the Song of Solomon is greater than any psalm that David wrote. Than any worship song that was ascribed to him. He says, no, like the Song of Solomon, this is the greatest song. I mean, it's about sex. And so I think approaching it, man, from like that standpoint of like, if my son or daughter is having sex, well, I'm not going to try to, fear them into not having sex. And like, listen, we're not saying like don't put boundaries up. Like,
No.
like,
You gotta have
listen, like
boundaries,
put
yeah.
up boundaries. Like hand out the discipline because like it is wrong and it is sin. Okay,
Yeah.
like and it needs to be dealt
the
with.
parental block.
Yeah, we need that.
like listen, all that stuff happens, but like within that happening though, right? Like it is not like this shame based. Like how could you, how dare you, or whatever. Like it's like how can I approach it in discipline and joy at the same time?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Here's some quick resources when it comes to anybody, listening, when it comes to like, I need some more education, which I think in all honesty, the church needs more education when it comes to this. So I'd say the book Purity, the New Moral Revolution by Chris Valentin and Jason Valentin.
Very good.
Really good book. Moralrevolution.com or .org, I want to say. Moralrevolution.org. There is a whole blog and e-course on like parenting sexuality.
Moralrevolution.com.
Moralrevolution.com.
So good.
Really, really good resource.
Fight the New Drug has a lot of good resources too. They're not a Christian one.
So good.
Fight the New Drug. That's really on pornography.
Yeah.
Covenant Eyes is a great resource when it comes to, as well as when it comes to like porn blocker and putting things like that in your home, which I think is actually pretty wise.
Yeah.
So Covenant Eyes, if you want to look more into the history of purity culture, just Google David French purity culture, and he has a whole article on pretty much the history of purity culture. So
So
well, I think I just want to end on this because, like I said, this is the beginning of a conversation. There's no way that we can get into all the nuance of all of this, but to understand that, I think I really just want to zoom in on something that you said of teaching sex from a place of celebration instead of a place of fear and taboo and uncomfortability, but speaking to it from a place of like, man, this is...
and not only sex, but sexuality.
I was like, we didn't even really delve into sexuality like that, but this applies.
Well, because I think, so one of the things that I have been saying to, obviously I talk with young men all the time, and you're not going to talk to a young man these days that's not dealing with some form of pornography addiction or whatever, or at least fighting that fight. I don't know. I don't know that I've had a conversation. I was even talking with Pastor Eddie, our counseling pastor. I was like, we need to start going into marriage, like premarital counseling, with the understanding these guys, and now increasingly more so, probably these women have been watching pornography, have had pornography as an influence in their lives, right?
And so they have this image of sex.
And so there's this image of sex. So now what do? Do we cower in fear over that? Or do we start to try and seek to understand sex from a place of celebration, from a place of, because the conversations that I've been having with these guys is like, look, you've been taught it all wrong. And I would say the same thing for women. You've been taught sex all wrong. You've been taught abstinence all wrong. And abstinence should not be a place of fear and anxiety, but it should be a place from sex is beautiful, sex is amazing, sex is a gift. And so I'm not going to abstain out of fear. I'm going to abstain out of this is a treasure. I want to guard this treasure. I want to protect this treasure.
Unto the Lord.
Unto the Lord. And not just for my spouse, for Jesus. And whenever we start to understand purity from that direction, from that realm, it becomes a joy to say, again, not just no, but yes to the Lord.
And then too, I think it's really important to mention that like it's okay to talk about like the consequences of having sex outside of marriage. Like once again, it's like that fireplace, the fire that leaves the fireplace. So it's like it is important for students to understand that when they do wander outside the boundaries that God set up, that not that like you're going to hell or you have the scarlet letter, but like you're causing pain.
You're hurting yourself
and confusion.
You're just hurting yourself.
So that's so good. Well, that's all the time we have for today. We love you guys, and we will see you next week for the next episode of This Generation. See you guys next week.
Thanks for joining us for tonight's episode of This Generation. Looking for more content like this? You can head on over to our YouTube channel anytime to find more of This Generation, as well as so much more content like it. Go ahead and subscribe so you'll be notified anytime we upload a new episode. Now, before we end tonight's broadcast, I just want to remind you that shows like This Generation are only possible because of your generous giving. Here at CL, we are not only reaching people locally in Fayetteville, North Carolina, but shows like Masterclass, Prayercast, or CL Talks have been able to reach people all over the world. Because of your giving, we are able to continue creating shows like this that are available for anyone, anywhere to view at any time. So thank you, CL, for being such a generous church. You can give easily by going to the CL app and clicking the Give button on the bottom of your screen. From there, you'll be taken to another screen where you can easily type in the amount you would like to give. You can also go to mycl.church/give anytime to see the many ways you can give online. There is so much happening here at CL, and we want to make sure that you are staying connected with us. The best way to do so is to download the CL app. There you can find events, messages, and watch even more shows like This Generation. We would love to see you at the prayer room this week. Prayer room is open throughout the week on campus in the Building C Arc, and we would love to see you there. Our hope here at Covenant Love is to continue to grow deeper in daily relationship with God, and we truly have been encountering Him each week in the prayer room, so we would love to see you there. Well, family, that's it for this episode of This Generation. We'll see you next time.